The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The NSA has repeatedly claimed that the bulk collection of phone records and other metadata only allows the NSA to look for trends and make connections and see who might be a shared contact between others whom aren't specifically identified. But an article on TechCrunch, now shows that a researcher has proven that the NSA can identify individuals in most cases just by having their phone records. And to be honest, this isn't really a long stretch to imagine this. When you get a call on your cell phone from a number you don't recognize, if you punch that number into Google, very often you'll figure out who it was simply by doing that. And if you don't, having access to other, for example, social media platforms, etc., could certainly help you track down who is calling you, who a certain number belongs to. And that's essentially what this Stanford study did, Lewis. This is Jonathan Mayer. He's a Stanford researcher. He found that he could easily match so-called metadata to individual names with little more than a Google search. He said if a few academic researchers can get this far, this quickly, it's difficult to believe that the NSA would have any trouble identifying the overwhelming majority of American phone numbers. So using a crowdsourced public database of voluntarily submitted phone records, Metaphone, they sampled 5,000 numbers from their crowdsourced data set, and then they queried Yelp, Google Places, Facebook directories, and with just those three sources, they matched just over a quarter of the numbers that they have. Now, conservatively, if you really put any effort into doing this, they randomly sampled 100 numbers from their data set, ran Google searches, and in under an hour, they were able to get 60 of the 100 associated with specific people or businesses. And when they combined that with Facebook, Yelp, and Google Places, that went up to 73%. This is not a big surprise, Lewis, right? This is kind of obvious, this idea that it's only metadata, we know nothing else. Well, with very little effort, you can find out much more.
With very little effort, using resources that everyone has available, not to mention the resources that the NSA would have at their disposal, which could be just a simple matter of searching all of their records and everything they have on file. I would assume that they would probably be able to come up with about 90%, match 90% of the numbers they have.
No question about it. And this is not about whether government agencies should or should not have this information of whose phone number belongs to everybody, right? That's a separate conversation. We just can't have an honest conversation about this if we pretend it's just metadata. We don't have anything else, and that's not it. Anybody sitting in front of a computer with access to the internet could easily match 3 out of 4 of those metadata numbers that are collected. And I just don't get why anybody is surprised by this. It really seems pretty obvious to me. The question then becomes, does this keep us safe? Kind of a more pragmatic, practical question. And extensively, Lewis, we've talked about how increasingly nobody, the NSA, President Obama, etc., seems to be able to make the connection between this and increased safety.
Right. We just don't have the evidence. And is this a deterrent? I would say no. I don't think that the NSA having your phone number is going to be a deterrent from you wanting to commit some type of heinous crime.
The government shutdown significantly shifted 2014 polling towards Democrats because overwhelmingly Americans knew the shutdown was the responsibility of Republicans. Many Republicans loved the shutdown. They wanted a shutdown. They were predicting and calling for a shutdown for years. But now we actually see a shift in the other direction, in part because of the Obamacare stumbles getting started. Mediaite has written up the recent polls. The CNN ORC poll back in October showed Democrats defeating Republicans in kind of a generic 2014 ballot, 50-42 by 8 points. Now, the latest CNN poll shows Republicans taking the lead over Democrats, 49-44. This is a 13-point swing. Even worse for Democrats, the survey found that voters loyal to the party in power in the Senate are less enthusiastic than average about even voting in 2014. Only 22% of Democrats are describing themselves as extremely or very enthusiastic. I think it might actually be time to become more concerned for Democrats. Democrats have a history of blowing midterm elections. Think back, Lewis, to the 2010 midterms, where in the lead up to the passage of the Affordable Care Act, the Obama administration and Democrats more broadly did an absolutely laughable job, terrible job at explaining the benefits of the Affordable Care Act, at really explaining why this is a victory, and they suffered because of it. And now that we're just days from 2014, these polls start to matter. One caveat, Lewis, before I let you comment on this. A couple of Democratic commenters, I don't know what we would call them, analysts, have said that national polls on 2014 are oversampling Republicans. We don't have specific evidence of that. There are simply some Democrats who are suggesting that. We don't know. That may be the case. Lewis, what are your thoughts about these numbers?
Well, it's an early poll, and I don't really like polls, so I'm not going to just wholly accept this. But I will say that if these numbers are true, I think it's pretty shocking. I think it shows that, assuming Republicans are not being oversampled, that a lot of the people supporting Republicans don't care that they did absolutely nothing and were just obstructionists, or think it's a good thing, or don't even know, to be perfectly honest.
There's one other possibility when it comes to the numbers, which is how much does a generic ballot poll translate to individual voters? Because I can imagine, Lewis, if you poll people broadly, they say, we are way less in favor of Democrats than we are Republicans, broadly speaking, because of these four issues. But when it comes down to election day, they still will look at the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate and say, hey, listen, even if nationally I'm less in favor of Democrats right now, given the two choices I have, I'm still going to vote for the Democrat. And that's something that the poll can't really tell us.
Right. Oh, there's a lot these polls can't tell us. That's certainly a factor. And it's so early. I wouldn't put too much into this.
What I can guarantee you is that Democrats need to get moving now on Obamacare PR as we get into 2014 and people start actually getting the coverage that they signed up for through healthcare.gov or the state exchanges. They can't do the 2010 election job and expect to hold on to the Senate. It's just they need to do better, and we'll see what happens. Another element, another side of American politics right now is the Tea Party. And the Tea Party seems to be refusing to die, Lewis. The Atlantic has an interesting article saying, we've heard this all before. The Tea Party was supposed to be dead. The Republican Party on the way to moderate repositioning after Obama's victory and Democratic congressional gains in November of 2012. Yet, less than a year after post-election Republican soul-searching supposedly occurred, radical forces pulled almost all Republican House and Senate members into at least going along with more than 2 weeks of extortion tactics, namely the government shutdown. And the article goes on to talk about how there are still big money funders and free market advocacy organizations that are still kind of behind the Tea Party. This is very interesting to me, Lewis, because when the Tea Party first rose to fame, I won't say rose to power, because I would question how much power they ever really had, but when they rose to prominence, we said, and I think we agreed, Lewis, one of two things will happen to the Tea Party. It will disappear completely and not be talked about, or it will essentially be integrated into the broader Republican Party and just will be indistinguishable from mainstream Republicans. And what's interesting is that while those things have happened, the Tea Party, more as an idea, has not disappeared. I believe the reason is because there is still a strong wing of the Republican Party that is obsessed with so-called freedom and libertarian type values. And that is going to continue, I guess, funding or pushing the so-called Tea Party, even if the specific politicians and the groups have lost a lot of that power.
Yeah. Well, I guess they're not really doing themselves any big favors by still calling themselves Tea Partiers. I mean, why don't they just call themselves libertarians? At least there's that movement as well.
There
And at
is.
least they're taken a little bit more seriously,
The,
right?
the so-called libertarian movement, branded as such, has never become as palatable. The Tea Party rose in direct opposition to President Obama. Some say that the Tea Party movement will die with President Obama completing his second term. I think if Hillary Clinton is the Democratic nominee, the Tea Party voice will still be there. There's some kind of PR value to Tea Party that libertarian doesn't have, Lewis. And that's what's keeping the Tea Party alive, even if there are kind of shared values in significant amounts there.
Yeah, well, I think we can both agree that it's not really helping the GOP to have the Tea Party still be active, I guess, right?
I think you're probably right. I mean, when you look at the Tea Party, the prominent Tea Partiers in the Republican Party, people like, I don't know, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, I think we could call a Tea Partier, there's definitely a rift between them and people like Chris Christie. At the same time, though, Lewis, I don't know that Chris Christie is viable nationally for Republicans. So while there is conflict there, I don't actually know that putting all of the eggs in the Chris Christie type basket is going to reap rewards for Republicans.
I'll tell you what, if one of these Tea Partiers becomes the guy, the GOP guy, the candidate, they're not going to call themselves Tea Partiers anymore.
Scott Walker has made Wisconsin #1, Lewis, in jobless claims. The Cap Times is reporting that in spite of the fact that Scott Walker did run for governor on a promise to create 250,000 new jobs, he is falling short of that goal in Wisconsin. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, 4,420 Wisconsinites filed initial unemployment claims in that last week of November. The next two highest states combined, Ohio and Kentucky, didn't even add up to Wisconsin's total. And this is happening, Lewis, at a time not when every state has increased unemployment. If you look at California, Texas, Florida, Michigan, blue states and red states, they are seeing declines in jobless claims. This is not regional either. If you look at Minnesota, Wisconsin's neighbor, Minnesota is thriving while Wisconsin continues to struggle. There's tons of excuses that Scott Walker is making, including the deer hunting season, which I find to be patently absurd because that extends beyond Wisconsin. There's really only one explanation. Under Scott Walker, Wisconsin has engaged in this terrible, I don't know that I would call it an experiment, kind of a policy of prioritizing the fantasy of debt reduction, which we've extensively talked about, Lewis, how debt reduction does not bolster the economy, right? It simply does not create jobs. And we saw the war on labor. We saw Scott Walker putting the so-called fiscal house in order by this kind of weird definition that the right has created and letting all sorts of practical stimulus go. This is what's going on, Lewis. It is becoming abundantly clear the Scott Walker austerity experiment has failed miserably.
No, I think his #1 goal was to protect big business, was to protect his investors, I guess you could say.
Yeah, right. The people who invested in his campaign, because as we know, political contributions are essentially investments for many people. You know what I think would be the solution to Wisconsin's job numbers, Lewis? More abortion restrictions and preventing gay guys from getting married to each other. That'll really help the economy, I think.
Priority #1, David.
It continues. I'm very curious, actually, going back briefly to 2014. Are these social issues going to continue playing a prominent role in Republican politics? I know that they need those issues for fundraising, but maybe they're going to start giving up on them, Lewis.
Well, I think the country is leaning towards the left on these social issues. So
Yeah.
I think slowly, eventually, of course, it will not be part of the debate.
Excellent bonus show today. We will talk about Egypt declaring the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. Dennis Rodman's back in North Korea. Always exciting. Only 2 days left on the David Pakman Show year-end membership special. Go to davidpakman.com/2014 here. Get yourself a 1-year membership. You'll be set for all of 2014. You'll get the bonus show, the commercial-free archive, all that stuff. But in addition, we'll get you a David Pakman Show hoodie made from 100% recycled materials, as well as a David Pakman Show bumper sticker, and you'll be entered to win either an iPad or Microsoft Surface in our January giveaway. DavidPakman.com/2014 here. We'll be right back after this. A lot more coming up today, including an interview with Howard Bloom. He's an interesting guy, that's for sure.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Did you know that study after study after study has shown that increasing taxes on the rich does not kill jobs? Weird. The only possible conclusion, Lewis, is that the word study itself is liberally biased. Go to liberalbias.com to find out more. Today's new member of the day is Leslie Jones. Thank you, Leslie. Join Leslie at davidpakman.com/2014 here. Amazon items, you can support our program by going to our website, davidpakman.com. And before you do any Amazon shopping, just click on the Amazon banner. Then do your shopping. No forms to fill out. You'll be supporting the show. We like to see what our subscribers and our viewers, Lewis, are purchasing. Here's something interesting. The Skeptic's Annotated Bible. This is so obvious, but for some reason I never thought of it, and it just makes perfect sense. You have the Bible, but it's annotated with information as to how or why what's in there could not possibly be accurate. It's actually a really good concept.
I have never heard of it, but it sounds great.
Also, a couple of people purchasing the Stephen Hawking book, A Brief History of Time. Excellent, excellent book. Just the title of it is interesting. A History of Time. Highly recommend that book. And then also, Lewis, here's a quirky item. Men's Nair hair remover. This is that cream that you rub over your hair and it just gets rid of the hair. Honestly, this has always freaked me out a little bit. Not that I've ever had the need to purchase this product, but when I think about hair removal techniques, and women also use Nair, it can't be healthy that you just wipe a cream on and it basically removes your hair. How does it work? Is it just kind of burning the hair off?
I don't know, but I agree. I assume it's probably not too good for you. Maybe if you put a dab of that on your fingers and just kind of move it towards your head, your hair will get scared and start behaving.
Yeah, I should try. It could be used not as a way to remove the hair on my head, but just to try to basically scare it into submission. It's definitely something I'll make a phone call about, Lewis. Thank you. So remember, you can support our show with the Amazon shopping you already plan to do by using the banner on our website. Since it's the end of the year, Lewis, and we cover Fox News' coverage of stuff extensively, I thought, what are the worst Fox News moments of 2013? Salon actually put this together. These are the 5 worst Fox News moments according to Salon. I'll play a little bit of each for you, and then we'll talk about them. Number 5 is Bill O'Reilly saying Asians aren't liberal because they're industrious and hardworking. Listen to this.
Generally speaking. But you know what's shocking? 35% of the Hawaiian population is Asian.
Right.
And Asian people are not liberal, by nature. They're usually more industrious and hardworking.
But number 4, this is very recent. Megyn Kelly arguing that Santa Claus just is a white guy.
So in Slate, they have a piece on .com. Santa Claus should not be a white man anymore. And when I saw this headline, I kind of laughed and I said, oh, this is so ridiculous. Yet another person claiming it's racist to have a white Santa. And by the way, for all you kids watching at home, Santa just is white, but this person is just arguing that maybe we should also have a black Santa. But Santa is what he is, and just so you know, we're just debating this because someone wrote about it, kids. Okay, I wanted to get that straight. But Jedediah, when I read
Number 3 is Republican favorite, up-and-coming Republican star Ben Carson equating LGBT individuals to NAMBLA, a.k.a. pedophiles, and to bestiality supporters.
Thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that marriage is between a man and a woman. It's a well-established fundamental pillar of society. And no group, be they gays, be they NAMBLA, be they people who believe in bestiality, it doesn't matter what they are, they don't get to change the definition. So
Number 2 on the Salon top worst Fox News moments of 2013 is Geraldo Rivera saying that actually the jurors in the Trayvon Martin case would probably have shot Trayvon even faster than George Zimmerman did.
So it's a dark night, a cities putting themselves on that rainy night in that housing complex that has just been burglarized by 3 or 4 different groups of black youngsters from the adjacent community. So it's a dark night, a 6'2" hoodie-wearing stranger is in the immediate housing complex. How would the ladies of that jury have reacted? I submit that if they were armed, they would have shot and killed Trayvon Martin a lot sooner than George Zimmerman did.
And then the number 1 worst Fox News moment, according to Salon, is when Lauren Green interviewed Reza Aslan and just couldn't figure out why a Muslim would write a book about Jesus. What could he possibly know about that, Lewis?
Well, this is an interesting book. Now, I want to clarify, you're a Muslim, so why did you write a book about the founder of Christianity?
Well, to be clear, I am a scholar of religions with 4 degrees, including one in the New Testament and fluency in Biblical Greek, who has been studying the origins of Christianity for 2 decades, who also just happens to be a Muslim. So it's not that I'm just some Muslim writing about Jesus.
So those are the top 5 according to Salon. I actually don't know that I agree with the Geraldo moment, Lewis, because I just don't know that that would be on my top 5 worst. What about Sean Hannity filling the room with hand-chosen black people made out to make it appear like black people actually don't support the policies of President Obama? Or what about when Gretchen Carlson was shocked that Festivus, which is invented by humans, could be equated to Christianity, which was invented by humans? That was a classic. What about Sean Hannity on Veterans Day spending more than twice as much time on the phony war on Christmas than on actual wars where veterans died? There were so many in 2013. This is a good sampling, but I think if I had to replace one, Geraldo goes.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think that Geraldo thing was pretty insensitive. He basically just stands there and shouts out, well, anybody would have shot this kid.
It's true. You know, I think what's making me hesitate is that there were other points in Fox's coverage where Geraldo was more reasonable about Trayvon, in direct contrast to some other Fox News talent. So maybe that's just kind of clouding my judgment about it. But a very interesting list. It's been a hell of a year for Fox News. That we can say with certitude.
It seems to be getting worse. It really does.
No question about it. And the addition of Elizabeth Hasselbeck to Fox and Friends, I think, is going to reap dividends for us for 2014 for sure. A teacher told a black student, "We don't need another black president." Raw Story is reporting that a teacher in Ohio has been suspended for allegedly telling an ambitious young African-American student that the country just doesn't need another black president. According to the Cincinnati Enquirer, Gil Voigt was suspended without pay from Fairfield Freshman School, which is the first step for termination. The teacher has 10 days to ask for a hearing before the school board or a referee. Now, Superintendent Paul Otten said this occurred while Voigt was speaking to a black student who had presidential aspirations, and he allegedly said, "We do not need another black president." This is the comment where I start to get a little bit upset, Lewis. Fairfield City School Board President Dan Murray explained, "We take diversity in our school seriously with tolerance of people who are different." You take it so seriously that you tolerate those who are different? That sounds to me, Lewis, like a pretty low bar.
It's kind of a weird statement. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there was any harm in it. I think it was just very, very poorly worded.
Voigt has also received 4 other reprimands in recent years, one for an inappropriate racial comment in 2008. He makes about $74,000 a year, which is about $33,000 more than the average Ohio public employee. Here's me saying maybe he didn't mean something that bad, Lewis. Okay, what do you think about this? Maybe he was just making sure that the student knew it isn't mandatory that the president be black, because maybe the student didn't know that seeing President Obama. Is that possible? Is that maybe what he meant?
Well, considering that he said this in response to a young black student expressing presidential aspirations, I would say that no, it was probably extremely racist and derogatory.
I can't help but feel like this is the type of teacher that used to tell the smart African-American standout students that they should be studying woodworking instead of encouraging them to be doctors or lawyers or scientists. It feels kind of like an extension of that.
This is incredible, David. The salary this guy was making, I mean, I think I'd rather have a shoe teaching children.
How soon does he start hosting the Culture Warrior segment on Bill O'Reilly's Fox News show? That's the real question.
Or does he make an appearance on Duck Dynasty or something?
Right,
like that?
exactly. He's replacing Phil Robertson. Okay, let's take a break. Next, we'll talk to Howard Bloom. Join us on Facebook, facebook.com/David Pakman Show. It's great to be here on the second to last show of 2013.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Howard Bloom. He's an American author, scientific thinker. His new ebook is called How I Accidentally Started the 60s. Howard, it's really great to talk to you. You know, in researching for this interview, I'm confused and bewildered by your entire career. Is it true that you were a publicist in the 70s and 80s for example, Prince, Billy Joel, Styx? Were you ever a publicist for Michael Jackson? Is that true?
Michael Jackson, Prince, Paul Simon, Peter Gabriel, David Byrne, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Kiss, Queen, Run DMC, and a whole bunch of other. David, I discovered at the age of 10, I got into theoretical physics and microbiology. And at the age of 13, I discovered that what really fascinated me was the kind of mass human passion that shows up in the forces of history, the kind of stuff that a man like Adolf Hitler was absolutely brilliant at manipulating. And if an evil guy like Adolf Hitler could manipulate it, then I felt it was up to those of us who were in science to learn how to do it and do it better. So I knew nothing about pop culture. Other kids did not want me in their culture at all. And it was very hard to get into pop culture, but I felt that in getting into pop culture, I was getting to the dark underbelly where mass myths are made, where the forces of history are born. So I went into a field I knew nothing about, pop culture, and founded the biggest PR firm in the history of the music industry.
Right, and for people who aren't watching, you're definitely, would you consider yourself an eccentric guy? I mean, even with this interview, you're wearing a bathrobe, you're wearing 2 sets of headphones right now. You're definitely an interesting guy, right?
Yes. Look, when I look at my own biography, I'm as flabbergasted by it as you are. I mean, what in the world is a guy who has worked with rock stars, but whose primary focus is science and has been his whole life, doing with the 11th president of India or Buzz Aldrin or any of the other people, 3 government ministers in Malaysia, giving a speech on why everything you know about theoretical physics is wrong to an international conference of quantum physicists in Moscow. David, this doesn't compute.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
Before we get into some of the more political stuff, what's the most bizarre Michael Jackson anecdote that you have from being a publicist for him?
The most bizarre Michael Jackson anecdote is that Michael Jackson was the most astonishing, it's still hard for me to get used to the fact that he's gone, was the most astonishingly beyond human being I've ever met in my life. The first 2 rules of science are the truth at any price, including the price of your life, and look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there. The second law, well, the first law is the law of courage. The second law is the law of astonishment, amazement, awe. When you stood next to Michael, and Michael opened, let's say, the first page of a portfolio by an artist, you saw a quality of awe in Michael you had never, ever expected to see in your life. It hit you like thunder and lightning. He was the second law of science incarnate, just flat out astonishing.
All right, not exactly what I was maybe looking for there, but I think...
He wasn't crazy. He was very sane. He was very sane and very deeply committed to his audience and very deeply committed to giving his audience the same kind of wonder and astonishment that he got from the tiniest of things.
So Howard, back in '86, you formed this group Music in Action, and you wanted to protest against the censorship of rock music, and a lot of it was actually being sought out by religious fundamentalists. At the same time, you partnered with Ted Nugent in that endeavor, who now has become kind of a mouthpiece for the gun enthusiast, not religious right, but certainly many of whom are part of the religious right. Is there any kind of conflict there? Has Ted Nugent changed? Have you changed since '86?
There is an inaccuracy in the Wikipedia reportage on this. It was actually David Krebs, who was Ted Nugent's manager. David Krebs, Bob Guccione Jr., the founder of Spin Magazine, and I convinced the two of them to join me in Music in Action. But I never met Ted. I only followed him indirectly through David. And if
that
Ted
makes a lot more sense to me, actually. It doesn't really make sense that Ted Nugent would be involved in something against religious fundamentalism, because that group seems to have embraced him completely.
Well, if Ted Nugent and I were in the same room today, we'd have a great deal of difficulty, and you would probably have a great deal of difficulty with him too, not just because of his very far-right leanings, but because of his absolute gun fetishism.
Yeah.
I mean, guns are, I don't know, I'm sure we all have friends who have guns, but I loathe and despise the idea, and I loathe and despise what guns are doing to the United States.
I want to talk a little bit about an article in Omni magazine that you wrote, which is of some controversy, and I'm very curious to get your thoughts on this. From what I've read, you indicated that the importance of hugging suggests that Islamic cultures treat their children harshly and that it results in violent adults as a consequence. And this is a claim that has led the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee to be displeased with what you said, etc. Explain that comment. Do you stand by that inherently hugging in Islamic cultures leads to violent adults?
Yes. Alayla Abu Lagad, who is an anthropologist, she is an Arab anthropologist and an Islamic anthropologist, was the one who came back from a field trip to Egypt with very vivid descriptions of the extent to which intimate hand-holding, hugging, even calling your husband by his first name is banned in a good part of Islamic society. And look, there's a big Islamic world out there. It's 1.8 billion people. The Islamic world spans 13,500 miles from one end to the other. So you can't make a generalization that applies to everybody, but there is a tendency, according to Arab social scientists and according to Muslim social scientists, there are serious problems in the Islamic family, and an awful lot of it comes from this lack of physical affection, from severe coldness, from the old idea that we call in the West spoiling the rod, sparing the rod spoils the child. And one other thing to recognize is most of my work, I've been doing 40 years of scholarship now on Islam in Islamic sources, not in Western sources. And the result is I appear regularly on Saudi TV, I appear regularly on Iranian TV, and one of my biggest fans is on the ruling council of Dubai and is the senior aide to the Sheikh of Dubai and runs Dubai's real estate operation.
No, I understand that, but let me see if I can refocus the question in a different way. Do you think it's possible that it isn't the lack of hugging in and of itself that might make someone violent, but rather that the lack of hugging might simply be a consequence of something else? In other words, how can we really say that it is hugging or not hugging specifically that leads to X, Y, or Z in adults?
Well, I think what you're implying is absolutely correct. It's a complex of things. And I have a book. It came out at the same time as how I accidentally started the 60s as an Amazon.com ebook called The Muhammad Code. And the Muhammad Code is the story of how Muhammad himself founded jihadism, founded Islamic extremism, one of his favorite words, Muhammad's favorite words, was terror. So there's more than just the family structure and specifically the way in which the family treats warmth and intimacy going on here. There's a cultural tradition that goes all the way back to 622 AD when Muhammad began to set up a society in Medina. So there is a complex of things. And again, you will find many exceptions to any general rule like the ones we're talking about right now.
But I think speaking of exceptions to the general rule, the overwhelming majority of those who consider themselves Muslim are not violent, right? This is the problem I have with, I think that when you on one hand you say you don't want to generalize, but on the other hand, you're making the generalization that most Muslims or even a significant portion of Muslims are violent. There is extremism in all religions. We cover it extensively on my program, but it is the exception. There is nothing specific about what Muhammad said in the Quran or what Jesus said in the New Testament or whatever the case may be that makes people violent, but these sacred texts can be used by anyone who wants to do violence.
Well, let's imagine, because there are no statistics on this. There is polling data that periodically comes out of the Muslim world, but it doesn't give us a handle on how many people are violent and how many people are nonviolent. However, if only 1/10 of a Muslim world of 1.8 billion people tended toward violence,
but even that is absurd, Howard. 1/10, 1 in 10 people is violent based on their association with Islam. I mean, David, I think it's absurd.
Yes, you could say that. But if you read the book, you'll see that Muhammad set up a military state that that publishers in places like and religious groups in places like Saudi Arabia and Pakistan brag about how many square miles of territory he conquered per day.
Yeah.
He set an extremely violent example, extremely. And in mainstream Islam, you are only considered holy, righteous, and just if you follow in Muhammad's footsteps.
I don't disagree with you there. In the same way that if you literally follow much of what's in the Bible, you also would be an incredibly violent person. We have points of agreement here, Howard. I just think that where I disagree is that in practice, any significant portion of actual Muslims are violent in the same way that a very small portion of Christians or Jews are violent. It's a very interesting thing. I know you have a lot more to say, but unfortunately we're out of time. We will have you back. Very interesting. Howard Bloom.
Thanks, David.
The new ebook is called How I Accidentally Started the 60s. Really great to have you on.
Okay, thanks, David. Have a good day.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Last week, we told you about same-sex marriages starting in the conservative state of Utah. We now have a follow-up on that story. The Salt Lake Tribune is saying that same-sex couples have shattered marriage records in Utah in the week since a federal judge overturned the ban on same-sex marriage. The number of weddings in the state has skyrocketed, shattering records and accruing thousands of dollars for Utah's counties. As of the close of business Thursday, more than 1,225 marriage licenses had been issued in Utah since the previous Friday, according to numbers obtained by the Salt Lake Tribune. Of those, at least 74% issued to gay and lesbian couples. Not all counties saw this rush to get married. There were some counties, Lewis, that had absolutely no same-sex weddings. And given that it is Utah and that there are counties with small populations, that's not at all surprising. The big point I draw from this is, once again, Republicans are supposedly pro-business. They are for fiscal conservatism and the ability for businesses to make money. How do they not realize that full marriage equality across this country would be a huge economic boom for so many types of businesses that are involved with weddings? I mean, just think about it. Think about the money there is to be made, unless they're going to be like the cake shop owner, Lewis, who would rather go to jail than make a cake for a lesbian wedding. If that's the case, then no, it's not going to be an economic stimulus for them personally. But at the state and federal level, it still would be in the aggregate. Huge.
Well, I think most of these lawmakers would do anything to avoid jail, literally. But it's clear that their religious convictions are going to come before any type of sensible lawmaking or business decisions.
When I was a kid, I always wanted to go to SeaWorld, and, I never ended up making it to SeaWorld, and I'm glad, and I will never go there, absolutely, especially after seeing the latest documentary about SeaWorld called Blackfish. I've been aware of the treatment of whales, of orcas, killer whales, for some time, but the documentary Blackfish, which streams on Netflix, and I encourage you to watch it. I watched it a couple days ago. Lewis watched it last night. It really shows that it kind of profiles the injury to trainers and the number of trainers that have been injured or killed by killer whales. But really, this is not because of violent whales. This is because the conditions in which these whales are kept and the entire business that has been built around keeping these whales that are sometimes used to swimming 100 miles in a day in tiny little cubicles. If you think about the size of a whale and the amount of space they're given most of the day, completely inhumane, Lewis. This is a huge problem. SeaWorld is not an ethical business, period. Keeping whales in these conditions is just not ethical.
Yeah, I'm totally against it. I've been against this type of thing for a while. Zoos I put in the same category. And yeah, it's got to stop. But how do you stop it? You're never going to stop people from going to them. I think in the case of SeaWorld, the only way to stop is if people stop trying to work there, if people stop applying to be animal trainers. But is that going to happen?
I don't know. One of the most incredible parts of the movie is they have undercover footage of, or it appears to be undercover. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just somebody posing as a tourist and filming, but they give little tours of SeaWorld and they just straight up lie to you. And I'm not saying that it's the young tour guides that are actually creating these lies. It's clearly SeaWorld that is instructing them. I don't even know if the individuals believe stuff, but for example, somebody asks, why is the whale's dorsal fin floppy instead of standing up straight? And they say, oh, in the wild, actually, 25% of killer whales have floppy dorsal fins. Completely untrue. Actual research shows that in the wild, only about 1% of killer whales have floppy dorsal fins, but in captivity, tons of them do. Then they ask, oh, well, what's the lifespan of a killer whale? And then this is just amazing. At SeaWorld, there's video of this in Blackfish. They say, oh, in the wild, they live like around 25 or 30 years, but here in captivity, because of the great medical treatment that they get, they can actually live longer, like 35 years. Flat out untrue. Google it. The average male killer whale can live, let me back up. The average female can breed until age 40 and can live way beyond that, Lewis, 80, even 90 years. And male killer whales are typically 50 to 60 years would be the max. But this idea that they have such better lives here at SeaWorld, they live so much longer, it's just such BS, and this entire industry has been built around it.
Yeah, it's all crap. I hate it, and it is totally inhumane and ridiculous. But it's big business, and big business is hard to stop.
And just look at how these whales communicate, right? Non-repetitive, non-overlapping vocal communication that is the closest thing. Marine biologists hesitate to truly call it language, but it is the closest thing to language that exists on this planet outside of humans, certainly within cetaceans, including killer whales. And it's just amazing that they're in these conditions. Any human in equivalent conditions would also go nuts and turn violent even without a kind of a predisposition towards that. We have a voicemail line. The number is 219-2-DAVID-P. You can call anytime. Here is reaction to us talking about the individual who was arrested and detained for having Arabic note cards. Someone is angry with me, Lewis. Listen.
Assalamu alaikum, David. I was just finished watching a video about the guy being pulled over for having Arabic flashcards. And though I agree with you on the rest of the story, I found that your comments about Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan incredibly offensive. These are areas with beautiful and vibrant culture, which deserve just as much respect as cultures in Barcelona. And I think that your comments that the only possible reason anyone would want to go there to help are incredibly condescending. Anyway, other than that, I agree with you, but I think that you should probably reevaluate how you look at North Africa. And
I actually love North Africa. I've been wanting to travel to North Africa for a long time. I think maybe there's a misunderstanding. My point was that from the view of the average college student given the opportunity to in junior year go abroad, a preponderance of American college students would much prefer to go to Barcelona than to these other places, and we see that in the facts. It's not a reflection of my personal views about North Africa. In fact, Morocco, Lewis, is near the top of the list of places I would like to visit, as well as Egypt and some others. I think just a misunderstanding.
Right, and that happens often. We both do a lot of talking, and for some reason people want to listen to us, and sometimes there's just some confusion.
All absolutely just confusion, certainly not being critical of anyone who would want to go to any of those countries for the reasons that were listed in the voicemail or others. So on that note, I will remind you that there is only one more day after today during which you can take advantage of the David Pakman Show membership plus hoodie plus bumper sticker plus iPad giveaway entry special. There is only one website where you can take advantage of that, davidpakman.com/2014 here. We will talk to you on today's bonus show and, of course, tomorrow on the last show of 2013.